Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Has everybody had a great afternoon? How about David Barr? One more round of applause, please. Our program continues with Brian Kahn from Franchise Group. It's entitled The Future of Retail Franchising. Not only does Brian have decades of battle-tested experience growing and managing retail and service businesses, he also truly believes in the future of franchising, so much so that he quite literally created a franchise conglomerate in the Franchise Group. In the franchising industry, Brian doesn't just make moves, he makes news. Anyone who has even a passing interest in growing a world-class brand into a franchising powerhouse should be taking notes during this interview. Antonia? Welcome, and welcome to, is this Springboard 1 for you?
Yeah, yes, it is.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you. We're very, very, very grateful.
Yeah.
So Brian has a long history in franchising. It began a long time ago. I want to let you jump right in and tell me a little about what brought you to franchising. What was your first franchise move?
Sure. Well, I was an accidental franchisee, acquired a chain of rent-owned stores out of receivership court in Arizona in, I think it was 2002, 2003, and ended up operating those two chains, actually, Choice Rent-Own and Ace TV Rentals, and sold a chunk of those stores to Aaron Rents and Ken Butler. And he decided he wanted the rest of the stores, so he called and said, thank you for the 33, but if you don't sell me the other 50 or become a franchisee of Aaron's, we're going to go open stores next to you, and he meant it. So I said thanks, but no thanks, and 6 months later I called him and said let's talk, and so I ended up becoming a franchisee of Aaron Rents and enjoyed that for 5 years.
So a franchisee, huh?
I was a franchisee.
And how did you enjoy the franchise relationship?
It was interesting. It was my first time being a franchisee, first time being a part of a franchise business. Learned a lot, which was good. I was a lot younger then. I could afford to make mistakes. Didn't have 4 kids at the time. And I remember a lot of phone calls to Ken where he finally got sick of me calling and asking for this or that or this or that, and would just answer the phone saying no every time he saw my number. And
we have a class on that after
that's
this.
Right. And then what do you want? But it was good. Learned, like I said, a ton about being a franchisee. Certainly learned that I'd rather be a franchisor, and ever since then, that's the role that I've played.
And what was your next franchise endeavor after Aaron's?
Well, the next franchise endeavor was, I guess I bought, after selling my franchise stores back to the franchisor, I had a 3-year non-compete, and as luck would have it, right after that non-compete ended, I was able to acquire Buddy's Home Furnishings, another rent-own chain that had just begun franchising, and we converted several company-operated stores to franchise stores, and also endeavored to grow the franchise business, and it's actually a business that is part of Franchise Group still to this day.
I was going to say, right? I thought,
Yeah.
is that the foundation of the group? Did it start with that?
Yes, in some aspects, that's correct.
That's really interesting. And did you do anything? So did that then begin the course for Franchise Group acquiring these other businesses?
Yes and no. In 2018, my partner Andy Lawrence and I had contracted with Rent-A-Center to acquire Rent-A-Center and merge Buddy's into Rent-A-Center. 6 months after signing that deal, Rent-A-Center broke the deal and got out of it with a legal loophole, and so we were stuck. We were really stuck But we still own Buddy's. We had acquired a controlling interest in Liberty Tax, which at the time I think had 3,500 tax centers in the U.S. and Canada, and we had planned after acquiring Rent-A-Center to effectively merge Liberty Tax, or the concept of providing tax service for 3 months a year, into the Rent-A-Center locations. We knew from owning Buddy's that several of our general managers and our franchisees would do tax work on the side in the back rooms for a few months, generate extra income during tax season. And so we knew, same customer base, stores were frequently right next to each other, and it would have been a good combination. But when the Rent-A-Center transaction was terminated, we still owned Buddy's, we still had a controlling interest in Liberty, and ultimately we determined the best thing to do is to merge those two businesses together and then form what would become a diversified franchising business. And that's how Franchise Group came to be. Yeah.
So, hello. So, Franchise Group's brands, and trying to pinpoint a dot on you in terms of what you go after, is incredibly challenging because you've acquired a diverse group of companies and a diverse group of retail businesses, including tutoring and education. Really, guys? Including tutoring and education from Sylvan, pet supplies and services from Pet Supplies Plus and Wagon Wash, to home furnishings from Badcock and Buddy's. Can you give me some insight into your investment strategy and sort of what you're trying to put together?
Sure. They're all actually remarkably similar because they all generate a lot of free cash flow, and that's really what we think about at Franchise Group, and I think we think about free cash flow because that's what franchisees ultimately think about. Unit economics are the most important variable for us when we're looking at a brand, looking at a concept, because we know that the minute we acquire or start a brand or a concept, our job is to sell territories to franchisees, and that math is what they're going to look at first and foremost as well. If the unit economics aren't there, then the rest just doesn't matter.
Interesting. So free cash flow from a franchisee's perspective in terms of...
Yeah, out of their box or whatever it is that they're operating. That's right.
And how did you come to select these particular brands in this order? It's been a short time, right? We're talking just a few years.
It was a short time. So again, going back to 2019, when we put Buddy's and Liberty Tax together, at that time, we were already in the middle of a diligence process with American Freight Furniture and Mattress. So that was already, that started, I believe, at the beginning of the year. Vitamin Shop is a brand. It was a public company at the time, and we owned a very large equity stake in Vitamin Shop and had for a couple of years. So it was a business that we knew very well. And Sears Outlet, I think, was another one that was one of the early acquisitions. Sears Outlet was two different businesses at the time. Sears Outlet owned the outlet business, which is the one that we acquired, and they also owned, I think it was Sears Hometown, which was just a plain old retailer of power tools and appliances that Eddie Lampert would use to sell his goods through 700 plus effectively distribution outlets to the public. And that was a tough business. It's low margin products, and the business was struggling. Their dealers were struggling, and their CEO had reached out to me. Everything with Rent-A-Center was public, and knew what we were trying to do with with the number of stores, and he reached out to figure out whether or not we could do something with them whereby they would convert all of these hometown stores, instead of just selling appliances and power tools, being able to add not only electronics and furniture as product categories, but add the service of providing rent-own options to the customers, which was something that, it's just a great business and a very high margin as well, which helps it become an even better business. So we knew him. He had actually become as a test before you buy strategy. He had begun converting some of his locations to be a Buddy's Home Furnishings franchisee. So they had converted 10 locations, mostly in the Texas area. So we already had that relationship with him, and he was already in our system when Eddie Lampert decided to buy out the rest of the Sears outlet business he did not own. They had a Go Shop that just happened to begin, right, it was the end of May or beginning of June of 2019, and it was out of that Go Shop process that we acquired Outlet, and did so, specifically with the thought of merging Outlet with American Freight, which we were, had begun a totally separate process, but putting those two together and
Are any of the
rebranding.
Sears still operating under the Sears brand?
No, they're almost all still operating, but they were rebranded as American Freight Furniture, Mattress, and Appliances. So they didn't sell any furniture or mattresses. American Freight didn't sell any appliances, and putting those together and adding product categories has worked well.
So was it just a real estate and distribution play, or was there any allure to having the Sears brand, even though it was in a state of disrepair at that time?
Right. Well, I definitely don't think Sears would have helped. I think that we looked at it as rebranding from Sears would actually be helpful. I think that the consumer has, by and large, either they don't know what Sears is, or the ones that do don't necessarily, trust the brand. And so what was once a great brand name, I don't think has been, useful for quite some time.
So with all these acquisitions, and many of them occurred in 2019, did any of these brands have interesting, are you I read about you, and you seem like a technology guy, and that seems to be your bet for the future, but did they have any technology that was sort of advanced and not otherwise commonplace, either Vitamin Shops or Pet Supplies or anything?
They did not, and in fact, if anything, I would say it was the opposite. Sears operated in 2019, much more like they operated 10, 20 years previous. And Vitamin Shop, although Sharon, our CEO, has done a great job developing the e-commerce business, direct to consumer. Vitamin Shop, which has been around a long time, was actually very late to the game. Prior management just didn't really believe that it was going to be necessary, and they didn't invest in a direct to consumer strategy. So, they actually were very far behind.
Interesting. So, in terms of distribution, do all the companies have standalone distribution, or do they share any common attributes or any warehousing or anything like that?
If you mean distribution in terms of distribution centers, they do not share distribution centers. In fact, each of the businesses we own today operate completely autonomously. They're their own management teams. We do that by design. You probably invest a considerable amount of cash each year to allow them to maintain their autonomy, but they do not share distribution.
And I guess I've read about some of those investments, and I guess I'm aware of sort of Pet Supplies Plus having a robotic, distribution center of the future in Indiana, and I think I read the same about Vitamin Shops. Do they each have sort of those amazing dark kind of warehouses?
Yeah, I think that each of the brands understands probably enough to be dangerous that technology is important, but technology is also best left to the technologists, and Vitamin Shop has spent a considerable amount of money on technology. They do have robotics in their Arizona distribution center specifically. PSP has experimented. I think that what they've seen is that robotics probably at this point are not worth the investment, and even Amazon with similar product categories has not found that robotics at this point are worth that investment. But there's lots of other technology that they do employ, lots of new technology. Machine learning, AI, has been a hot topic over the last couple of years, and most of the brands are experimenting. Cyber is probably a good place to find AI and machine learning. A lot of the marketing strategies have included AI and machine learning as well, specifically for PSP and Vitamin Shop as well. And then some of the brands are a little bit slower. Badcock, that we acquired last year, family-run business for 117 years, 5 generations. A lot of their operations, a lot of the way that they think about how to run their business has been the same for 117 years. So not quite as technologically advanced, but they're learning. And I do think that by exposing each of the management teams to each other, they learn from each other, and they are able to come up with their own new ideas internally based on their peers that are within Franchise Group.
Could you elaborate a little more on the AI and learning aspects that you were referring to earlier? Like for the regular emerging folks here, what's what's that mean? What is the ultimate? What's the end game, and how does it happen? How does it work?
Yeah, look, it's very much too new to know. It's going to change. Whatever you would think it would be today would end up being wrong. A lot of money will continue to be invested in AI, and you'll have vendors that will sell their services based on AI because they know that their audience really doesn't understand it. My thoughts are to be very patient, test, don't just buy, don't convert, don't make big bets, because technology changes very rapidly, and you make a big change today, and you'll be looking at another big change a couple years down the road with a giant sunk cost to be thinking about as well.
So the folks in this room that are emerging shouldn't be concerned that they're not yet on the front edge of that.
You're not behind, absolutely not. It's going to change, and you don't need to be first.
So I know I've talked to lots of folks in this room and about your background and about interesting questions to ask you, and many people know that you were a recent, I guess, failed suitor on the Kohl's department store chain. And in a world where Bed Bath & Beyond has its problems and many big issues, and sort of discounters are in the crosshairs, I'm just wondering what you think what was your motivation behind that potential acquisition, and really, what were you going to do with it?
Sure. Well, I don't think we failed.
That's
the first thing. But no, look, Kohl's is in a difficult business, and Kohl's is certainly not a franchisable business by me. It may be by somebody, but it is certainly not franchisable by me. I think that the attraction to Kohl's was in really two things: the quantum of free cash flow that it generates in good times and bad, and the ability to ring fence the risk of what's a seriously troubled business away from Franchise Group and all of the wonderful brands that we do own. The goal was really to be able to take that free cash flow out of Kohl's and reallocate it to other brands where the use of capital had a higher and better use, potentially acquiring other brands using Kohl's cash flow, not to go open more Kohl's locations or invest further into Kohl's. It was more about the cash flow and the structure of the transaction that was attractive to me.
So Kohl was just a vehicle. It wasn't some long end game where you were trying to get within a mile of my house and everybody else's house.
No, it was a means to an end, not the end. Absolutely, I think that's fair.
What do you see as the future for companies like Kohl's, department stores that have lots of inventory, and sort of in the next 5 years?
Look, last couple years, the discussion has been around retailers having too little inventory. because of supply chain constraints. Now, all the massive orders that took place well in advance because lead times had been extended are now, coming home to roost because you have all that inventory that was ordered a long time ago hitting at a time when the consumer is weak and buying less. So it's really a double whammy. That will pass. That is not really a concern. If anything, that could be an opportunity in the present time. But that isn't really, that's a large issue for Kohl's today, but it's not a permanent condition. Department stores generally, large boxes, very large boxes, could be 135,000 feet, 115, 90. And in those boxes, I think you'll find most large box retailers finding that they have unproductive space and trying to figure out what to do with that. And I think that over the next several years, if I was a department store, I would try to figure that out because I don't think it's going to get better. But some retailers may be able to reinvent themselves. I'm far too boring. I'm far too simple to try to reinvent. It's something that's that complicated. A lot of department stores are very heavily into apparel. That's a difficult business. Trends change very quickly. You have to be much smarter than I am. So I think that they've got their work cut out for them. They've been around a long time. They've got a lot of very good attributes as well, and we'll see what happens.
Wow, how interesting. So we talked before outside. We were talking, and I appreciate that the supply chain because that's what led us into our discussion earlier. We've all been terrorized by the labor issues and sort of the don't want to work, do want to work. Tell me a little your view on labor, where it is now, where you see it going over the next 5 years, and whether you see any correction in store.
Sure. It's been tight. It's been tight for many well-advertised reasons, whether it's because people just have chosen not to work because they didn't have to work, or coming out of COVID, people make different life choices about what's important to them, and certainly having government subsidies has helped to allow people who don't want to work to be able to actually choose not to work. I think that is changing very rapidly as we sit here today. I think that the issue is still that unemployment is very low. It's far below what I would consider to be a healthy equilibrium where employers need employees and employees need employers. But with all of the hiring freezes, and I promise you Google hiring freeze and today's date every single day for the next 100 days, and you will see a new article about a new company instituting a hiring freeze or a massive layoff. And that will get the unemployment market back into an equilibrium that will be healthy. Chances are, as most things happen, that it will overshoot. And I think that you'll end up seeing employees need employers again as much as the employers need the employees.
Do you have a date for that? We can write in our calendars. Send me a reminder, Antonio. Yeah, that can't happen soon enough.
Well, look, with my management teams, as we're going through our budgeting process for next year, as we do every October, November, and I think it'll culminate in November, I already know what I'm going to hear. I'm going to hear how difficult it's been. Warehouse employees are hard to find, and you've got competitors that are out there poaching employees, offering big signing bonuses, and that all is true. That has been happening for the last couple of years, but I don't think that is going to last much longer, and I'm certainly willing to make the bet that we don't need to do that because it is happening rapidly. Now, that's my bet. We'll see next year when we're back at this conference whether or not I was right or not, but I do think that it's happening far more. Things come down much faster than they go up, and it took a while, and it took stress in the system for those wages to spiral out of control just like it took time for container costs to spiral out of control, but they come down much faster. And I think that, with the help of what the Fed is doing, increasing interest rates and all the capital investment that's just going to come out of the economy, I think that we're going to see, a return to equilibrium much faster, certainly much faster than we otherwise would have, and I think fast enough that employers can be patient.
So not that you would ever say it's good, but do you think that the rising rates are the antidote for the runaway inflation?
Well, I think it's great. It's not just, I don't think you were going to get out of it otherwise. I think that's why every time, you've got a reporter that goes on television or a pundit that, goes on the radio or writes something in the newspaper about, the Fed changing its mind and rates are going to stop going up, and then you reflate the stock market and everything else that goes along with it. I think the Fed's done a great job reminding as quickly as they possibly can, we're not stopping, and we're going to go until we win, because you do need to break the neck of inflation, and that's not going to just lead to what everybody wants, ultimately, 2 to 3% price increases each year. It's going to actually lead to prices going back, costs going back to where they were, and then a steady rise, and I think that's what needs to happen. I think it's great. It's a little bit of pain to go through, but it's well worth it, because you weren't going to get out of it otherwise.
So you're a franchise guy. So like when you see these things, we called them headwinds this morning in our discussion, and certainly rising interest rates doesn't strike anybody, probably me and anybody in the room, as being particularly conducive to selling and opening units faster, at least at this moment. It's certainly going to be more costly to open, and your units are big.
Well, why not? Why is it?
Well, isn't it more expensive to finance it now, and don't people have less?
Financing will be tough to come by, absolutely. But you have a lot of people who are going to become candidates, franchising candidates, who are either not going to have a job that they wish that they had, or fear losing their jobs when unemployment rises, and all the companies, or not all of them, but many companies are doing RIFs and certainly hiring freezes. Those are all candidates for us.
Does the decline in the stock market would seem to impact people's ability to even pull the trigger and go on, on low, but higher level investments particularly?
Sure. I think the wealth effect has a great impact. I think it has a large impact on the economy, period, and I absolutely think that it will. But look, it's franchising. You're giving franchisees a chance to control their own destiny and to build, generational wealth if they're successful. I think what we offer is a fantastic opportunity in all climates.
Interesting. So you alluded to something, I'll just let you put a fine point on, that the upside of this are all these people that may become candidates for franchises, to become prospects because of their either disdain for their present employment, or working generally for someone else. Are you seeing that in your operations? Are you seeing better qualified candidates that bounced out of the employment market?
No, not yet. I think that I think we're still early. We're still not to the point of equilibrium even, and I think that the higher income candidates still have jobs. I think that it's been the lower income consumer that's been hit the worst so far by inflation. They just don't have as much discretionary income. It doesn't impact the higher income consumer as much, and I think that the layoffs are just beginning, and like I said, still well below equilibrium.
Well, we're hoping some of those people come. We're hoping there's enough of them that are at the top of the food chain that have the resources to obviously still be able to finance and successfully operate their businesses, it would seem.
I agree.
I want to go back to retail for a minute, because we all see Amazon, we see drones driving stuff around college campuses, dropping stuff off. I mean, innovative, obviously, ways to get that last mile to the consumer. Competing with Amazon is always everybody's question, but I can ask it that way, or ask you how you see the future of retail, because it would obviously involve taking into account those kind of competitors.
Which would you like?
Let's do Amazon first.
Amazon. So question is, how do we compete with them, or how does one compete?
So
with
how do you do it
Amazon?
now, and how do you see the next, 10 years playing out in terms of retail? Well, you sell the same stuff, right?
Yep,
They sell vitamins, they sell dog
Yep,
food,
That's a good question. And look, I think that the best way to compete with Amazon is not to compete with Amazon. First of all, it's, as a retailer, I'm trying to sell a widget. They just happen to sell widgets. They're trying to buy customers. And if I have to get in a fight with Amazon over price, I'm going to lose every time, because either I'm going to lose the customer to Amazon, or I'm going to have to discount my widget by so much that I'm going to wish I hadn't sold it anyway, because I don't, that just doesn't work. I think that, for my money, I'd rather focus on competing with Amazon by doing things that Amazon isn't interested in doing. And for us, that frequently means service. We, even with our retail businesses, we try to focus on having an answer to the question of, what service are we providing the customer, period. And of course, the rest of that could be that Amazon is not going to provide. And so, that's our focus. Sometimes, you will still get into a catfight over price, but I think it's great to be aware of what Amazon's doing, but I don't think it's a great strategy to try to literally compete with them day in, day out, because our objectives as a retailer with any of the retail businesses we're involved in are completely different than theirs, and they can afford to buy the customer because they're looking for the life of the customer, not just to buy vitamins or buy pet food, but to sell them all kinds of other products and potentially services as well.
Interesting. And so is there a separate answer to the question of where you see retail in 25 years?
So 25 years, well, I'll be 74 years old, so that's it.
We together.
It's a good question. I think that the honest answer is I don't have any idea. I know it's going to look different, but I don't know how. I know, I know history, but I certainly know history far better than I know the future. I know that 25 years ago, Amazon didn't sell anything besides books, and look how much has changed in 25 years. Not just with retail, but Amazon specifically. And 25 years ago, there wasn't an Apple iPhone. I think when was that created? Like 2007? Okay, so that's 15 years ago. Wow. I mean, so think about that now. How many retail transactions do we really think happen without the use of either an iPhone or Amazon? Not that you're going to buy it on your phone, not that you're going to buy it from Amazon, but that somehow you haven't used, one of those two concepts in making your decision. I know even when I'm going to a store, or if I'm going to a restaurant, I'm getting out my phone and I'm mapping it on Apple Maps. I mean, or I'm pushing gas station on Apple Map. It's, that just didn't exist apparently 15 years ago. So 25 years from now, I'm very confident that it will look different, and I'll come back in 25 years and we'll see if I'm right, but I don't know exactly what it will look like.
Interesting. Okay, so not everybody has all the answers, right? Isn't that the answer? So in the course of your travels and in looking at all these great brands that you've acquired, do you ever look at emerging brands?
I love emerging brands. I spend more time looking at emerging brands than mature brands.
Okay, so this is where we're going to roll our sleeves up for this audience. So,
Okay.
So you can answer the question any way you like. It could be advice to folks. It could be sort of what you've seen, the parade of horribles or the parade of amazing things, or what folks could do to groom their business to maximize value. It doesn't have to sell it to you, but to maximize value from how they might otherwise run it.
Okay, so, sorry, what's the question?
What advice do you have for emerging brands?
Okay, got it, yeah. All right.
I tend to ask a longer question with a lot of
good.
comments, but I think I was ending.
Sure.
I haven't ended there.
Advice for emerging brands, and I'll think back, well, I guess number one, I think if I'm an emerging brand, if I want to be a franchisor, I think that the best mindset is to be thinking about how to make the franchisee successful. And I have seen, and I've been on both sides of it, and I've dealt with companies that have done both. There are some, I'm going to try to think of how to say this without creating a labor law issue, but there are two mindsets where either a franchisor can think of themselves as working for the franchisee, or vice versa, and franchisee working for the franchisor. So I want to be, obviously I don't mean that literally, just in case anybody's listening. But I think that only one of those paths work, and I think that a franchisor has to think about themselves as providing a service to the franchisee, not the other way around. And as you're formulating your plans, that should be the mindset. And that also means that as you go along and you go from concept to having franchisees, dealing with franchisees is a pain in the neck. All the franchisees think they're smarter than the franchisor, and you want that. You want confident entrepreneurs to be in your franchise base, but don't be, I guess I'll say it the other way, be willing and embrace the opportunities when franchisees call you and complain, or call you and say, this other brand does it differently, and why are you doing it this way? Yes, is it frustrating? Is it insulting? Maybe the answer to that is yes, but it's also an opportunity to build trust with your franchisee. It's an opportunity to build a relationship with your franchisee. It's an opportunity to learn from your franchisee. We've learned some great tricks from franchisees, some great products. I remember a franchisee calling one day and saying, in a rent-own store where we rent furniture, appliances, and electronics, they wanted to add a new product category, which is a pain in the neck. You have to go add it to the IT system and everything else, and that product was purses. And it just didn't make any sense to me, but they were willing to invest their own money in it. They were convinced that it would work, and it did. And we ended up adding purses as a category for the benefit of all of our franchise stores because of this one franchisee. So, answer the phone when the franchisees call, and use those discussions as an opportunity. Don't take offense, and I think that will serve emerging franchisor very well.
Thanks, that's great. Last question, and you may have touched it in your own selection criteria, but we say this over and over again, how important are unit level economics at the end of the day in the franchise operation?
And it's the first, second, third most important thing. That's where we start and frequently end, because if the unit economics aren't there, there's really nothing further to talk about. And I think that if I'm a franchisor, and I need to be thinking about that, because absolutely, franchisee is going to go there first. And if the numbers don't pencil out, there is no further discussion. Unless you're going to sell a baseball franchise where the people don't buy that to actually make money, but there aren't a lot of those, and that's not an emerging franchise business.
That's great. Well, this has been great. Just because it's the whole emerging audience, I would take one question if somebody had it. I know we're short of time. Yes, Sam.
I got my pretend mic, but I'm loud. Brian, congratulations for your success. Unlike the financial crisis in 8-9, that the whole globe and the U.S. came out of it strong, right? The biggest growth period we've had. It was the biggest growth period even though a lot of companies had. Franchisees had great AUV growth, EBITDA growth. This pandemic has thrown us into
Well, we keep them all separate, so there is no global message that we push down. Each business has to stand on its own legs, and you know, I'm one of my many flaws is I'm always worried about the economy. I remember being in college and having a Wall Street Journal, front page of the Wall Street Journal is, this will date me, I think it was the Dow hit 3,000 for the first time, and I took the front page and drew an arrow going down and put it up on the bulletin board. There used to be, actual bulletin boards out there, and so that just my mindset is always, thinking that market's going down, the economy's going down, and when we are looking at brands, we're looking for brands who are recession resistant, because that's just unfortunately one of my flaws. I'm always thinking about a recession. Now we've learned our brands aren't all inflation resistant, because we've had inflation absolutely impact our home furnishing brands, but I think that you want to be prepared for all kinds of weather. You can't afford, if you're an emerging franchisor and your business means everything to you, don't put yourself in a position where you can have existential risk because of any one trigger, whether it's having too much debt and the lenders take it, whether it's having too much invested in a brand that is not going to be able to withstand a recession, because being able to withstand bad economic times becomes a selling point to franchisees in the future, when you can show them how, if they were doing what you're doing, they would have fared better than doing what they were doing with another brand. So it's an opportunity.
Well, this is great, and we are running out of time, and so first I want to get a big round of applause for Brian for helping us out today. So we're very grateful for you sharing your knowledge with our group. I know the group is impressed with the way we bring the curve up each year on the level and quality of speakers, and you've delivered an amazing blow up in terms of how we do that. But I wanted to induct you into our Springboard Hall of Fame right here and now. And so
Thank you. Thank you. I'll trade you.